Welcome to my video on refurbishing a Super Duty fuse box. This is the interior fuse box, and this is the one that has the gem module mounted to the top. Now, this particular vehicle I'm working on is a 2000 Ford Excursion, and it's got the 6.8 liter V10 in it. But it really doesn't matter what engine you have in any of these vehicles, the fuse panel will be the same. During these years, Ford had some design flaws. The windshield seal would fail, and when it rained, the water would run down the inside of the A-pillar and drip directly on top of the fuse and relay panel and the gem module. This was a very bad design, and eventually that water would cause corrosion and arcing inside of the fuse panel. And once it got bad enough, it would cause a parasitic drain, and it would drain the battery, and it would cause all kinds of other things due to the shorting inside of the fuse panel. This vehicle, when it would rain, would roll the windows down and try to start itself, and continue to try to start itself until the battery was dead. There were other odd things that would happen with this Excursion, even when it wasn't raining, like the radio would stay on occasionally, and the alarm that tells you that you're leaving the vehicle with the headlights on wouldn't work either. Fortunately, the fix I'm going to show you in this video will more than likely fix all of those problems, and usually the water and the corrosion caused by the water does not damage the gem module. In fact, it rarely gets inside. Only on rare occasions, when the short circuit inside the fuse panel is really bad, does it damage the gem module. So far in this video, you've seen me remove the fuse box by removing the 4 10mm bolts from the front of the dash panel, and then there's 2 more 10mm bolts in the back behind the 2 large electrical plugs. You remove those things, and those electrical plugs pull out. Then when you drop the fuse panel down, you remove the 3 additional wire connections. Then you'll remove the 3 torque screws that are securing the gem module to the top of the fuse panel. Then you'll pull straight up to remove the gem module. Here is some images of the corrosion that you'll see, which is typical if you are having this water leakage problem. If you see this type of corrosion and you're having electrical issues with your vehicle, then this fix is probably for you. Now, this fix does take a little bit of time. I'm thinking about 3 hours, and you can complete this entire project. That's about what it took me, even though I was recording. At this point in the video, you can see I'm pulling out all of the fuses and the relays. Before you do this, you'll definitely want to take a picture using your cell phone camera. Make sure the picture shows the orientation of the fuse panel and a really good view of all the different amperages on those fuses. Now that you've removed all of the fuses and relays, you can remove this cover on the top that was right underneath the fuses. You can use a screwdriver to pry that up. Now, you're going to notice that the material is very soft, rubbery plastic, and it mars very easily, so the screwdriver I was using was a little bit big, so you may want to choose a better screwdriver if you care what your fuse panel looks like when you're done with this fix. You'll continue to pry that up and release the tabs until this cover actually pops off, and you'll see the connectors where the fuses plug into directly underneath it. At this point, you'll want to pull out your cell phone again and take some very good pictures of these connectors. Also, you'll want to make sure that you can tell the orientation of the picture to make sure that these all go back in the correct way. Now, here in the video, you can see I'm using a pick to actually grab onto these connectors and pull them out. You need to remove all of these silver connectors. There are 3 different types. 2 of them are for the relays, and 1 of them is for just the fuse holders. This step is probably the scariest for most people. We need to remove these studs. So you need to find a drill that's just big enough to take that little lip off the top of those studs. And you're going to want to drill nice and slowly with control, because as soon as that little lip comes off, that's when you want to stop drilling. Right there. Stop drilling. Now you can see that both flanges have been drilled off, and all you have to do now is just take a screwdriver or something and push those studs through. At this point, you're free to be able to take this thing apart. So at this point, you can split the fuse panel. Here I'm showing you the 7 individual tabs that you have to separate and open up in order to split this case. After you've used a very tiny screwdriver to get in and pry those tabs apart and separated the 7 tabs, you can carefully lift up on the 2 halves. Don't worry about the plates that you're going to see in there. It's going to look like a mess, but don't worry about it because all the pieces of metal are held in place currently. After splitting the case, you'll want to pull out all of the individual plates and set them aside, keeping them in the correct order as you pull them out. At this point, you'll want the piece where the fuses and the relays went into to be on the bottom, because that's the way we're going to start building them back up. If they haven't already been separated, separate the plates individually and set them down one at a time. Here you can see all of the corrosion that is on all of those metal pieces, and also the carbon traces that are on the plastic. That's the problem, because the electricity will run along those carbon traces and cause all kinds of electrical issues. This portion of the video is showing the individual plates all laid out, and it also demonstrates very clearly all of that corrosion and carbon traces that were caused by water and electricity inside of this fuse box. This was a real mess. At this point, I'm going to create 2 individual recipes into plastic kitchen bowls. The first one will be apple cider vinegar, about half full in the bowl, and then dissolve as much kitchen table salt as you can within that apple cider vinegar. And the second one will be water with baking soda dissolved in it, about as much baking soda as will dissolve in the water that you start with. The first recipe with the vinegar is an acid recipe. It will eat the corrosion and other things off of those metal parts. The second one with the baking soda is meant to neutralize that acid. Now I'm going to start removing the metal tabs from the plastic plates. You don't have to worry about getting them confused or mixed up, because each plate has its own series of numbers molded into it, and each individual metal piece has that number stamped into it. Once each metal piece is removed from the plate, it's placed into the vinegar solution for a few minutes, and then eventually it's just stirred around and rubbed a little bit where the corrosion was. Once all of the corrosion is gone, you can just take that out of the vinegar solution and then put it in the baking soda solution, and you'll probably see a little bit of a fizz where that acid is being neutralized. Now that part is ready to be taken out of the solution and dried off. Once I had done one metal piece and saw how well it came out, I just decided to do all of the pieces. I kept them all one plate at a time, so what I did was went and removed all of the metal pieces from each individual plate at one time. Now, on that plate, there are little plastic tabs that hold those metal pieces in. Some of them you were able to just bend and pop the pieces out. Other ones you actually had to bend the plastic tabs back with a screwdriver, like you can see here. I would suggest doing that right from the beginning. Just bend all of those tabs out of the way so your metal pieces just pop right out. Once you've removed all of those metal pieces, those contactors, you can place them in the solution with the vinegar, and you can also place the plate in the solution with the vinegar. And I just put them all in, stirred them around to agitate the vinegar very well, and then I just moved that plate around. Once you could tell that all of the corrosion was gone, I pulled them out of the vinegar and put them in the solution with the baking soda, washed them around to rinse them off, then pulled them out and dried them individually. Since I wanted this to be a permanent fix and not ever to have to do this again, my thought was that I would coat these connectors or these metal pieces with a coating that would not allow electricity to flow through the outside of them. So I chose lacquer, and I put a very nice coating of lacquer over the whole thing, but I wanted to make sure that where the connectors plugged in, they were not covered with lacquer. So I just taped them off with painter's tape. You'll notice when you see me painting these, I'm using a spray can, but I used clear lacquer on the first couple plates, but then I realized, I'm having a hard time seeing where it's actually covering, so I chose a black lacquer afterwards. So you're going to see when I'm putting these together that some of them look like they don't have any lacquer on them, and other ones are nice and black, but that is the reason. I sprayed these with a very heavy coat of lacquer on all sides, kept flipping them over and putting more lacquer because I wanted them to make sure they were not conducting electricity. Here you can see the plate that I'm about ready to start assembling again, and you can see it's shiny. It's because I sprayed the whole plate down with WD-40 and let it dry. Now you can see me assembling this plate. All I'm doing is taking and looking at the metal connectors, finding the number, and then looking at the plate and finding where that number is and placing them in the correct location. You can see that I'm working on this and bending those plastic tabs back down to hold them in place. So like I said, you're better off to bend all those tabs up at the very beginning. I tried not to do that, but eventually I ended up having to do that. Like I mentioned earlier, it is actually a pretty easy job. It's a little bit daunting when you first start, but after you realize that it's like a puzzle, it's actually kind of fun. And like I mentioned, this took about 3 hours, and that was with me figuring out how to do this and also doing the recording. So I think somebody could do this in 2 to 3 hours by themselves. One thing to remember, that this fix is going to really help your fuse and relay box be almost bulletproof, but it will still be damaged if enough water gets in there, so you should definitely go back and fix that leak that you have in your windshield that allows this to happen. My windshield not only had a crack in it, but it also leaked, which caused this problem. So I actually called Safelite to come in and replace my windshield and the seal, and that solved everything. Here I am starting to assemble the box back up, and you can see that the section of the box that has the fuses and the relays on it is on the bottom, and I started putting that first plate on. Here you can see that I'm using a battery terminal corrosion inhibitor, and I'm spraying it on these plates, especially the plates that have metal connectors on the sides. Now you can see me assembling the second plate on top of the cover to the fuse box, and I'm having to align those tabs with that plate. As I mentioned before, each plate has numbers that are molded into it to let you know where each metal piece goes, but each plate is its own series of numbers. Like the first plate that I put on is the 60 series of numbers. The second one is the 50 series of numbers. And it continues to go down numerically until you get to the plate that you can see that I'm working on now, which is the side that actually has the gem mount on it and also the two really big wiring connectors on it. So those are the 10 series plates. As you watch me assemble this last plate, I just want to cover a few things again. Be careful not to force these metal plates because the metal plates are made of copper and they have a coating on them or a plating on them to keep them from corroding, apparently, but it doesn't work too well. It's important not to bend those things. Be careful as you're putting everything together. Don't force anything because you'll bend your connectors. Here you can see I'm putting on that last plate and I'm squeezing it, and the little 7 clips are snapping into place. I'm not forcing anything. I'm trying to make sure everything is aligned and goes in smoothly, and it did. And here you can see that I have a nice coating of WD-40 on everything. That is not corrosion that you can see there. That is actually baking soda residue. At this point in the video, you can see I'm using dielectric grease and putting a little bit on each connector as I'm sliding it into place. And you can see my cell phone in the forefront that has the pictures that I took earlier to show me where all of those connectors are. I continue to do this for all of the fuse connectors and also all of the relay connectors. If for some reason you had to go to a junkyard and get another one of these things, this is how you clone a fuse panel. So if you have a fuse panel that looks just like this and it has the same connectors and it's from a very similar year and you want to clone it, you would take a picture of your original and then you would move these connectors around to match your old box, because all of the electrical connections are all made inside of this fuse panel no matter what you have for accessories. After I've put in all of the electrical connectors, now I can replace that cover that covers up all of the connectors, holds them in place, and also holds the fuses and the relays. This cover has a lot of clips, so you really have to push it down. I'm using the back of a screwdriver to do this. At this point, now I can replace all of the relays and all of the fuses. And again, you can see that I'm using my cell phone pictures that I took earlier to make sure that I put them in the correct location and orientation. I don't know if it's necessary or not, but I'm also putting dielectric grease on all of the fuses and all of the relays, just to be on the safe side. I figured it couldn't hurt. Once all of the fuses and relays are in place, you can put those studs in place. The biggest drawback to doing this is that those studs are not secured in place at this point, because they can just slide in and out of your fuse panel. But once you put your connectors in the back and you screw it into your dash panel, it is fully secured. At this point, I pulled out the board to my gem module just to see if I could see any corrosion or any issues, and there were absolutely no signs of any water. So I clipped that gem module back together and installed it on my fuse panel. Remember, use all 3 of those Torx screws to secure it to your fuse box, and here you can see I'm putting dielectric grease on the back of that gem module just to be on the safe side. Remember, this is a plastic housing, so there's no need of over tightening those screws. I also, before putting this into the vehicle, I also put dielectric grease on all of those little connectors on the side of it, on the side of the gem module, as well as on the back of the fuse box itself. Now you can see me installing the fuse box assembly after it's all together. Remember to put the three wires on the side of the gem module. Make sure they click into place because this is not an easy place to work. So you're not going to want to have to remove this again if you didn't press those wires in enough. Sliding it into place is a little bit tricky, and keeping those studs in place now that they're not really hooked to the fuse panel is actually a little bit difficult. But once you get it in place, replace all four of the mounting hardwares on the dash, and then screw those big connectors into the back of the fuse box, and you're done. Hopefully this fixes all of your electrical problems. It actually did fix all of my electrical problems, so hopefully this fixes it. And remember to fix that windshield. Okay, thank you for watching. Goodbye.